Cairo, Seattle.
It's time to get schooled with the professor, John Clayton.
Welcome to Schooled with the Professor, and our topic today is a fun one. It's Matt Hasselbeck. And of course, Matt Hasselbeck, it's not because I work with him now at ESPN. I just respected his work on the football field, as I think everybody in Seattle fandom did like for so many years. You know, in many ways, until Russell Wilson came around, I mean, it was always going to be a debate. Who were the best quarterbacks in Seahawk history? Was it Matt Hasselbeck? Was it Dave Craig? Was it Jim Zorn? And I think the fact that Matt was able to take this franchise to a Super Bowl is the one that kind of put him over the top. Now, of course, you know, you have to share the limelight with Russell Wilson, and maybe Russell's going to win it in the end. But what you see with Matt Hasselbeck, he helped turn this franchise into a winning franchise, and that could never be forgotten. It's a quarterback-driven league. And so here comes Mike Holmgren in. He replaces Dennis Erickson. He makes the move, trades for Matt Hasselbeck, and they go through a little bit of an adjustment, trying to see, okay, is Matt the guy? Is he not the guy? He's a guy that, was kind of wondering, was he going to be a starting quarterback in this league? And the first year was tough. You know, he didn't get through without getting benched, and there's Trent Dilfer there kind of taking over. But once he got it down right. And what you saw with Hasselbeck, not only did he have the talent to make all the throws, but his game was cerebral. It was in his head. And it was perfect for a head coach like Mike Holmgren, because Mike's a big guy on execution. He wants the guy to go out there and be able to run the same plays. No, very few variations. Sure. I mean, you can have the ability, and Matt was able to earn that, to call bad plays and change it into audibles to make it the right play. And he was one of the absolute best in doing that. But he took the quarterback play and grew and gave the Seahawks the opportunity to grow, one of the better offenses, to a point where he did go to one Super Bowl, and then ironically played so well in that Super Bowl that you would think he got a win. In fact, as they were driving in that second half, he was putting together one of the great second half Super Bowl drives, but just crazy things seemed to happen. A drop here or there by Jeremy Stevens, a penalty that just seemed to be phantom penalties. All those things working against him, and in the end, he didn't get that Super Bowl, but he did have a great performance and a great career. And what's wonderful to see with a guy like Hasselbeck, he was, comes from a football family. His father played for so many years as a tight end. He had a brother. We all work together at ESPN right now. Tim, was able to get into the league and be a third-string quarterback with the New York Giants. And then, Matt had such a long career. And what was fun to see, and I still remember, he makes that transition at some point because, one, Matt loved the game, that you realize maybe your starting days are not going to be going as long, that you're now going to have to move into the backup role, and even extended his career to that long period of time. And I still remember going back last year to Indianapolis. Andrew Luck gets hurt. Matt Hasselbeck takes over and starts to save the season to a degree in being able to go out, play winning football. But boy, that offensive line was so bad blocking in front of him, both Matt and Andrew Luck took a beating, and eventually it did catch up to Matt Hasselbeck. And so after being a backup in Indianapolis for a great quarterback like Andrew Luck, after the season, Matt, I'm sure, toyed with the idea of staying in football, but decided better way to stay in football, a lot easier, being on the ESPN set and talking about the game, and he's so very good at doing that. And I think he's such a great asset right now, talking on Countdown, giving you the previews, giving you the analysis, and, of course, giving you, the history lessons of the team, and having such a long background in football, both as a son of a player, as a guy that knows the game so well. He knows it, and I think that that's what you respect most about Matt Hasselbeck. And I still think one of the favorite parts of the game was, one, watching as the game was going on, he would audible out of bad pass plays and put them in good running plays, or adjust the call to get the right running play going at the right direction. Very few were as good as him, but he was one of the best in doing that. And that tells you several things about Matt Hasselbeck. First, his ability to study. Second, his ability to go ahead and make the right calls. And then third, just to execute that. I know early in his career in Seattle, it was a little bit of a struggle because, remember, Matt was a teammate of Brett Favre. And Brett was great at doing that, but Brett was also phenomenal at just making some improvisational plays that would drive the coaches crazy. Underhanded throws, tosses here, take the ball, throw it left hand, do anything possible to be able to make a play and get the play right. And, Matt did pick that up, and naturally the coach would go crazy when he would start to do that. But it was always fun seeing the exchanges, and then fun hearing the conversations. And then the other thing that Matt was so good at is in the post game and then during the week, just tell you stories of what was going on, because he was so good at being able to talk about these things. And it was just great to be able to hear those stories day in, day out, week in and week out. And, he just was able to, get you a good insight of what it's like to be a quarterback on a winning team. And that's the key with Matt Hasselbeck. He was a winner. He was a winner in college. He played, he didn't get to play much behind Brett Favre. Very few people did. And so he was able to learn, but he was able to translate what it's like to be a winner on the field and off the field. And what's so nice is that in the community, Matt was such a good guy. Sometimes you have quarterbacks that not necessarily they're not good guys, but they don't kind of integrate. I mean, you look in Chicago and Jay Cutler. I mean, Jay Cutler, a fabulously talented quarterback, but some years, some games, some days doesn't mesh with the fans, doesn't mesh with his teammates. Well, that wasn't Matt Hasselbeck. He was great in the community. He was great, much like Russell Wilson is too, great with his teammates, great with the media, and he just made football such an enjoyable event. And of course, what's going to be enjoyable is chatting with him and kind of going through his history as a Seahawk quarterback and a quarterback who meant so much to this franchise. Coming up next, it's Matt Hasselbeck. We are pleased to be joined by Matt Hasselbeck. And Matt, first off, it's great to see you working as a teammate. I never thought we'd be teammates before because, having covered you for so many years, it's like, you're the player and you're the star player. I'm just a dumb reporter trying to do this. Now we're colleagues at ESPN, which I'm so thankful for. But also, I think this area has to be so thankful for what you did in Seattle on your Seahawk career. How do you look back at what happened to you once that move came and you came to Seattle?
Yeah, well, I don't know, John. I kind of thought of you as a teammate because you would always do your Sports Center hits from the parking lot at our Kirkland facility there. So when we were all lifting weights in the weight room, we'd see you out there with your camera guy, and you'd have a dress shirt on, a tie, a sport coat, and then usually like shorts and flip-flops. We're on campus there. We worked at the same spot. It was kind of fun.
That's true. And of course, I mean, that's the one thing, as you know, and you don't have to really, you put the sport coat on and anything else you don't have to worry about, and you can have Chinese food even when you're doing your TV. That's a different story. But yeah, the Seahawk career that you had, I mean, how do you look back on it?
It was, it really was a dream come true for me. I don't even know where to start. I got traded to the Seattle Seahawks. I didn't know I was going there. I got traded there. Mike Holmgren traded for me. He was my coach my first year in Green Bay, but quite honestly, I was the fourth string quarterback. I didn't know that he even knew my name. In fact, he had referred to me one time to the team as Mike and instead of Matt. So, when I got traded there, I really was, wow, I'm shocked, and this is a great opportunity. But I lost that starting job to Trent Dilfer, I guess that first year that I was there, and he was the starter going into the next year, and then he, of course, tears his Achilles tendon in the game where Emmitt Smith won the rushing title or set the record, and so I got the job back and I guess never looked back. So it was really I think it was unexpected, I guess is the way that I would say it.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, I guess there's a good and a bad, mostly good, working with a guy like Mike Holmgren, because say what you want, I mean, and you know it from Green Bay, from what he was doing with Brett Favre and you know what he was doing with you here. He can be pretty tough on quarterbacks, so he's pretty demanding.
Very tough, but it was great. I mean, like when I got drafted to Green Bay, everyone told me the same thing. It's like, listen, you're going to the Harvard Business School for a young quarterback. You got Ron Wolf, Mike Holmgren, Brett Favre, and by the way, the quarterback coach is Andy Reid. I mean, it was just a really, it was a blessing to get coached by those guys and get to be in the room with, Mike Holmgren coaching Brett Favre, and then I get to Seattle. And really, it was the same kind of thing. Jim Zorn was amazing for me as a position coach, as fundamentals, technique, intangible type stuff. And then, Mike Holmgren, as seeing things through the quarterback lens, was huge. I really feel like, one of my disappointments with us not winning a Super Bowl, winning that Super Bowl against the Steelers, is that I really think that Mike Holmgren would have had a much stronger case for the Hall of Fame if he had won a Super Bowl, with the Niners, and then won one in Green Bay, and then won one in Seattle. And we were not able to get that done for him. So, but he's a great coach, and his lineage of coaches that have come through his, on his coaching staff is strong.
I know just from him, though, there were some things that you learned as a student from even Brett Favre that would kind of drive him crazy because, the ability to try to improvise kind of that quick low throw, if just to get the ball. It's like some of those things, it's like it would, because, Brett was always willing to make that crazy play to get the completion, and you carried that over, which, of course, ultimately made you a better quarterback and then ultimately kind of drove him crazy at times.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, desperate times call for desperate measures, and I've thrown a couple passes left-handed, and I saw Brett throw a couple interceptions from his knees, and these are not things that you set out to do. But one thing that did help me is that Jim Zorn was like, listen, if you're going to do these throws, like let's at least practice them, so like in a practice or a scrimmage situation, what clubs you actually have in your bag and which clubs you don't have in your bag, and I'd rather you make those mistakes in practice than in a game, and so I think that was helpful. But Mike was definitely tough, and I think in my new role on Monday Night Countdown, I've shared quite a few laughs with Steve Young about Mike Holmgren, who was his position coach with the San Francisco 49ers, and Mike Holmgren used to yell at me sometimes when he'd get frustrated. He would say, you remind me of Steve Young right now. And I thought, oh, that's pretty good, actually. But he meant it in a certain way. And now that I know Steve the way that I do, I see some of myself in Steve, and I can see some of what would drive Mike nuts. So it's pretty funny. But I don't know. I feel fortunate to have been coached by him.
Yeah, of course, and that's the one thing, because he's pretty demanding, but he's also pretty simple in some of the. It's complicated maybe in some of the plays, but the one thing, he wouldn't let you go shotgun because he just was a believer in taking the snaps from the line of scrimmage, and so if you wanted to try to follow where the league was going, you basically had to follow what Mike Holmgren was doing, but then it worked.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of things. The ball was never allowed to touch the ground in practice. Like, that was just a thing. The ball is not allowed to touch the ground. And he would talk about when he was coaching at BYU how, the quarterbacks would go 17 for 17, and that just was the standard. And if there was an incompletion, we would repeat the play. And then, if he could tell that we liked the play, he would throw the play out of the game plan. It was definitely a mind control of, like, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect, or something like that. And just in terms of all the other stuff playing for him, I really loved how he would coach the quarterback. He would always say, like, playing the quarterback position is an art, not a science. And you're an artist, and paint your canvas. Like, throughout the course of the game, and when you watch some of the great players, whether it's Tom Brady, Joe Montana, whoever it is, those guys really do play the game like an artist. It's fun to watch.
Well, that was one of the beauties of your game here, and where you carried over after you left Seattle, was the fact that you were so good at the line of scrimmage in making sure if something wasn't right in the play that you can make it right, whether it's turning a pass into a run or run into a pass. Just looking at the way the defense was set up, you kept things honest, and that was one of your strengths.
Well, one thing I really have been very appreciative to Coach Holmgren. I've played other places. I loved how much responsibility he gave me at the line of scrimmage. And, early on it was tough because I wanted more responsibility, and he said, listen, you got to walk before you can run. And then when I eventually earned the right to have a lot of responsibility at the line of scrimmage, we really started to take off offensively. And, it's little things that, you can make a guard's job a little bit easier, or you can make the fullback's block a little bit easier, or you can, help the running game out. These things that really do affect the outcome of a game. And I always appreciated that he trusted me enough to take control of that stuff. And that was a struggle when I got to other places when I left, that people weren't willing to give me that same amount of freedom at the line of scrimmage. But, it was great. I definitely, looking back, I wish I had more time with Mike Holmgren.
Talk about the things and the keys in the buildup of that offense and the buildup of the Seahawks team to get to the point where you finally went to the Super Bowl.
Well, there's a lot that went into that, and it wasn't just the offense. The defense. The year we went to the Super Bowl, our defensive line led the NFL in sacks from a D line. And meaning a four-man rush, and I really I got to, tip my cap to the crowd noise in Seattle. I mean, the crowd noise that we had in Seattle allowed our speed rushers to get off the ball quicker than most. And then it had forced the, opposing quarterback to have to go on a silent count. What we were able to do offensively, we kind of took a step back in 05. We cut some wide receivers that had potential to be great. And we said, you know what, we're going to go with wide receivers that we know we can just depend on. They're pros. And guys like Bobby Ingram and Joe Jaravicius and DJ Hackett, some of these guys that maybe weren't, the most sought-after free agent acquisitions of all time, but they were really good pros, and they were great in the running game, great in the blocking patterns and stuff like that. I think they made a difference in that season. We had our running back was the MVP. Max Strong's one of the most underrated fullbacks of all time. Our offensive line had great leadership with Robbie Tobeck and a couple of Hall of Famers on the left side. And everything just kind of got, all came together at the right time that way. And I think for me, it was probably when I matured the most and I was ready to play, and, I had one of the best years of my career. And so, you put all those things together and you win some close games, and you have home field advantage in the playoffs. It's a really, that's the way to get to the Super Bowl. If you can host home games in the playoffs in Seattle, you got a great chance.
How do you reflect on the Super Bowl itself? Because as the game was going on in the second half, you were putting together one of the great drives in Super Bowl history. And then, of course, a couple drop passes, things kind of didn't go your way. You were really building a great drive, and then things just happened.
Yeah, it's disappointing. I'll be honest with you, it's disappointing. But so much of what I've seen, as a parent, I see, kids today, I don't know if they're not used to losing or if we've grown up in an environment where people say to, oh, everybody wins, we're not keeping score, whatever it might be. I've noticed as a parent, it seems harder and harder for these kids that I coach or kids that I raise to lose. And, people are real quick to blame the referee or blame the coach or blame something, and I've learned as a parent, it's really important. My kids know that they are never, ever, ever allowed to get in the car after a sporting event and complain about referees. And they just know it. And the reason they know it is because I will not allow them to do that. And that's sort of something that I've had to do out of that Super Bowl. The referees, you will never hear me blame the referees for us losing that Super Bowl. We did not play our best football on that Sunday. We had a great year, and we were the best team in football that year, in my opinion. But when it counted most in that Super Bowl, we did not play our best as a team. And that's just something you live with, and that's sports. And there's great lessons that you learn through sports, and that's a lesson that I learned. When that opportunity comes, you got to seize the opportunity. We did not, and there's a lot of things that get riled up for me when I think about that Super Bowl. But, that's probably why I hung on so long and played with so many other teams afterwards. I was hoping for a chance to get back to a Super Bowl and hoping to hoist a Lombardi Trophy someday. And that did not happen for me as a player. But the journey was the reward for me. It really was.
So not to complain about the officiating, but it was kind of interesting to see they acknowledged your tackling ability.
That was one of the most athletic plays of my career, that tackle where I got the phantom penalty. I was actually telling Trent Dilfer, we're on the shows together now at ESPN, and I was telling him about the play that we had caught the ball at the 1 yard line. Jeremy Stevens caught the ball, and they had called that, surprising holding call on our right tackle, Sean Locklear. And I loved the play so much, and I kind of had a feeling that they were getting a beat on our snap count, and I was going to go on a hard count, and I chose not to because I didn't trust our offense enough. I said, oh, man, if somebody jumps off on this play, Mike Holmgren's not going to call the play again. So I went on one, which is, blue four said, a kind of a standard count, and he jumped the count, of course. And looking back, I wish I would have got on a hard count because I know he would have jumped off sides. But I just loved the play call so much, and I was just afraid he wouldn't come back to it.
And finally, just living and playing in the Seattle area, how much did you treasure that?
I still treasure it, and I always will. And part of the reason is that it wasn't always the way that it is now. When I got there, we were playing at Husky Stadium. It was an empty stadium, and, the Huskies were amazing. So they had a sell out on Saturdays, and then we go over there and play on Sundays. And, the stadium was less than half full, and unless we were playing the Raiders or the Cowboys, then their fans would show up and make noise. And I would hear from Steve Largent and Jim Zorn and all these guys about how the Kingdome was so loud, and I just had to take their word for it. I hadn't really experienced that. And then we moved into what was then Seahawks Stadium, and then became Quest Field, and now is CenturyLink. And we developed a home field advantage. Like, we earned it, like game after game, year after year. Todd Lightwick came in and listened to the fans and said, "Hey, what can we do better? What do you guys want to see?" And it was like a two-way street, and we were in this thing together, and we all had this chip on our shoulder. We were not getting the recognition nationally, and we just, couldn't turn the corner in our new division, which was the NFC West all of a sudden. And we had the greatest show on turf, and we had Terrell Owens and all this stuff, and we finally put it together and got that home field advantage and kind of grew up together. And so it was really, really special, and I take a lot of pride in all the guys that I was teammates with, and the coaches and the fans that I met, and it just is a wonderful, wonderful place.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was a great career. Congratulations, and now it's great to have you as a teammate at ESPN. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John. See you, buddy.
Everyone, it's time
to ask the professor.
Preposterous twaddlecock.
Welcome back to Schooled with the Professor. Remember, each week you get a chance to ask me any question you have relating to the podcast. Just get on Twitter and use the hashtag ClaytonSchooled. This week, I talked to Matt Hasselbeck, and our question comes from Jim in Irvine. He asks, even though we all love Matt on ESPN now, do you think he'd ever go into coaching, and why or why not? And would he be a good coach? Well, I think he could go into coaching, but I don't think he will, because I think he's going to do so well in broadcasting, there's no need. And one of the things I think is so great about Matt is that, one, he's humble, and that helps. And also, he's good at being able to talk football, and that's going to give him a long life, I think, in the broadcasting business. One thing I found through the years is that, players can get jobs on TV because of their name recognition and what they did on the field. But then after about 4 or 5 years in broadcasting, you have, new groups of fans that are, younger and all that. They don't know who the guy was. And, the ones that last are the ones that are able to tell good stories, talk about the game, be able to do that. And that's what Matt is going to be able to do. It gives him a good life because, one, it's a good pay to be able to do this. He's very good at doing it. And I think he's going to have a long life. But I could see him getting into coaching, if that wasn't the case, because he has a great mind for the game. And, you can see, I'm sure, that as he, gets older and gets a chance with his kids, that, he'll get involved maybe with some youth things and things like that, because he'd be very good coaching. He could be a quarterback coach. In a lot of ways, I go back and really watch what he did working with Andrew Luck, which tells me he could be a very good coach, because Andrew was a smart quarterback. We all know that. Certainly one of the better young quarterbacks to come into the league in many, many years. And, Matt would help him through all the complex things. I know coaches always say you need a good quarterback room. Matt Hasselbeck made it a good quarterback room, whether he was a starting quarterback or the backup quarterback. And what he was able to do is help out. And sometimes what you need to do as a player is that, you go to the coach and say, I don't think this is a good idea for Andrew. Why don't you think about this, this, and this? And you kind of compare minds and all that stuff. And Matt, I'm sure, probably came up with good ideas that in conversations with Andrew, the offensive coordinator, and all the coaches in Indianapolis, they were able to do some things. And it works out. So I would have no doubt that Matt could be a good coach, but if you're also a good broadcaster, it's, less taxing. The one thing that may get him to do some, family type coaching, coaching maybe kids and things of that nature, is just, his love for the game and his ability to share that with people that are trying to get involved in the game and all that stuff. And again, I have no doubt that if he would ever want to pursue a coaching career, he could take it the right steps. He could be a quarterback coach, then eventually an offensive coordinator, and then possibly even a head coach. I think he would have the ability to do that, but I just think that takes so much time away from the family that it probably wouldn't happen, because one thing with coaching, you sacrifice a half of a year and you're in there a long period of time. So overall, I think that Coaching is something that could be in the cards, but it probably won't be in the cards because I do think he's going to have such a successful broadcasting career. But what you also want to see is the good guys have good lives, and he's going to have a good life in whatever he does. And the great part about him, because again, being in a new generation of football, because his father was in coaching, or no, his father was a player and was so good as a player, and he's in a family of football, that he's involved in football. That's the most important thing. I'm happy he's a teammate of mine at ESPN. At some point, I'm sure if he wants to get into coaching, that option would be there, and it'd be a good one. I just don't see that happening for now. But, he's adding to a great career that was on the field with what's going on great for him off the field. That's it for this week's edition of Schooled. You can follow me on Twitter at ClaytonESPN and send me your NFL questions with hashtag ClaytonSchooled. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.